Sekiro Shadows Die Twice might be one of the biggest surprises of the year. I knew going in it was going to be good, but not in the ways that I thought it would. It delivered in most aspects I was hoping it would, and it had me consistently hooked even 40 to now 50 hours in. Sekiro is an evolution in a lot of ways. It feels like its own genre, strangely enough. It's not shy from recognizing the studio's obvious heritage while taking a jab at an even more faster-paced action game. What Miyazaki and the team did was create yet another new IP that stands on its own merits and in many ways shows how change can always be a good thing if under the right leadership. Here's my review of Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. The story of Sekiro couldn't be more easy to follow. You are a shinobi tasked with protecting your lord's life, and you'll do anything to make sure he's out of harm's way. Just exactly what kind of rabbit hole you fall into isn't something I'm going to spoil here, but it has a rather quick introduction, and it isn't long before the game is now in your hands. The game overall has good short cutscenes. They're short and far between, but they're just enough to keep the plot moving and to remind the player what their current purpose is. The blend of narrative with the overall flow of the game was a worry that soon went away. It's nice to be able to have the big picture of what the game is without having to look up the lore yourself. It's way more explicit. I wouldn't say it's for the better, but it's definitely different, and I like the change. The world of Sekiro is intriguing and beautiful. It's consistent and never had me uninspired. The experience of slowly uncovering the world as you go from idol to idol never got old and always felt rewarding. Feudal Japan is in every way alluring as it is dark. There's a sense of beauty and peacefulness that Sekiro holds that you just can't give to their previous titles, and it really makes my time with Sekiro stand out. It's a more welcomed world for sure, but it will still flip you right on your butt if you're not careful. The level design is sadly where I had some mixed thoughts though. Because of the focus on agility and verticality with the world, Sekiro lacks the slow burn of slowly uncovering the world. It's just too easy to whip around the map and just often lead the cool areas and environments just being skipped over completely. It isn't necessarily a fault they could fix, I feel, as it's just the repercussions of what their vision was for Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. You don't feel as if you're expected to explore every corner of the world, and if you are, there really is no punishment for not doing so. Items found around the world are mostly expendable, with many being able to be straight out bought by merchants themselves, so what's the point? On one hand, I commend FromSoftware for taking the leap that they did with Sekiro, but it did sacrifice the exploration for sure for me. If we're talking about just how beautiful the game is, however, I think the footage pretty much speaks for itself. The satisfaction of persevering through the game's world only to be treated with the view of what's to come are some of my most fondest memories of Shadows Die Twice. Combat in Sekiro is all about reading enemy attacks and countering them. It's obviously the biggest part of the game, and luckily, Sekiro nails it pretty much dead on. It's all about posture. It's a longer game than just immediately whacking their health and killing them. I ultimately found it had more depth at the surface level than the Souls games. Of course, builds aside, that could change, but everyone who beats Sekiro truly has to master it and understand its combat. You can't beat this game without looking like a total badass and understanding what you're doing. Stealth is now a huge tool to Sekiro's disposal, as a single shinobi takedown can be the difference between life or death. Twice? Speaking of which, the resurrection system is probably the game's most notable change at the surface level, and I like it a lot. Dying is a lot more frequent in Sekiro, but the ability to be able to save your run by playing better knowing that you're on your last legs truly leads to some clutch moments I won't forget soon. It could sound unneeded and overly forgiving, but the resurrection system works alongside the other changes in Sekiro. I did really find this to be a more faster and forgiving game than all of From's previous titles I played. The loop of gameplay is dramatically different given the speed and forgiveness. The lack of farming blood vials and the ability to run past every enemy quickly getting to the boss leads me to having more time to fight the boss and learning, rather than farming for 10 minutes only to be wiped out by one hit. I'm looking at you, the Bloodstar Beast. The changes were for the better. While on the topic of combat, another core aspect to my enjoyment with the game stemmed from its progression. During any of my sessions, whether it be 45 minutes or 2 hours, I constantly felt like I was making progress. If you aren't collecting beads to increase your vitality, you just killed a boss and increased your strength. And if you didn't do either of those, you at least have some skill points to put into new moves. Or maybe you finally just got your 5th gourd. All these progression paths, and I didn't even mention the prosthetic arms, constantly reward the player in small incremental ways that is just far more superb than in most single player games around. It's almost as good as it gets. A key part of Sekiro is enemy and boss designs, and sadly I'm kinda mixed here. There are some great bosses here, some that may rank in my personal favorites of all time, but in a lot of ways the game's mini-bosses just come across as From just took them, added some health, and slapped them in later parts of the game. I really shouldn't be having to think, ugh, I have to fight them again. The main bosses, however, are really consistent and really do have their own set of distinct features and moves. As mini bosses clearly went from quantity, you really do get a feel that every boss in Sekiro is intentionally put where they are and where a player may be at that current phase of the game. This, combined with generous idle placement, really allows the player to jump back into the fight without having to haul their ass halfway across the town to reach them. Sekiro is easily the most approachable game to get into from in my opinion. Punishment for deaths come in the form of Dragon Rot, and without going into too much detail, you don't want to accumulate a lot of this, and there will be consequences if you do so. Dragon Rot, to my knowledge, is only gained when resurrecting, so it's forcing the players to pretty much question themselves whether it's worth it or whether they should just take the hit. It's an interesting mechanic for sure, nothing that really shaped how I played throughout the 50 hours sadly though. Unseen Aid is probably the most useless system From has ever made. Unseen Aid is pretty much an RNG chance of keeping all your money and experience post your death. When most of the game feels handcrafted and deliberate, Unseen Aid just comes across as quite useless and completely out of your control, not to mention how it always triggered when I practically had nothing left on me. Performance-wise, Sekiro plays about as well as a typical FromSoftware game would, so that means bad frame pacing and a few stutters in certain spots of the map. The old Yarnum entrance from Bloodborne says hello. If you're playing on an X or Pro, the game hovers around 40 to 45 frames per second consistently from what I've seen online, but never quite manages to hit the 60. It's a real disappointment that Sekiro falls in the same areas that Bloodborne did so many years ago and that FromSoftware hasn't learned. But it isn't anything game breaking at the end of the day. Just thank God the loading screens are faster this time around. I'm going to be honest, much of Sekiro's soundtrack was forgettable to me. I can only remember a handful of tracks, and that's even being generous. The handful of ones that stand out to me really do, however. I'm looking at the main theme and the general battle theme. The overall OST just doesn't really do it for me as it's not my style of music. However, the sound design is great. The sound of performing a shinobi takedown on even the smallest of enemies never gets old, except if you have to do it for thousands of times for that platinum. Overall, Sekiro Shadows Die Twice is a great game, arguably the best title to jump into from. There's a clear story to follow, plenty of named and memorable characters on the main path, while still leaving tidbits of lore for the fans of these games. It's a more explicit game as a whole as it sacrifices its previous RPG elements in favor of a more action-adventure game with light RPG elements. Throughout my 50 hours of Sekiro, I was entertained consistently and always had a reason to keep on going. I'd recommend this game completely to anyone looking for a challenge or hell, even just a meaty game to dive into. This is my favorite game of 2019 so far, and I don't see it being dethroned unless a few surprises drop later this year. You can't go wrong if you know what you're getting into. These games deliver on player learning more than most games out there. It's the classic FromSoftware experience, and Sekiro stands on its own merits despite having previous series to compare it to. Thank you so much for watching my Sekiro Shadows Die Twice review. If you enjoyed the review, I'd appreciate it if you left a like, and if this is the first video of mine that you're seeing now, make sure to subscribe for future content. As always, I'll see you guys in the next video. I've been Online. Take care.